Tri-State Freethinkers lecture series from September 2nd, 2015, How Change Happens, with speaker David Akadjian, board member of the Tri-State Freethinkers.
So quick show of hands. How many folks here like what's going on in our country from a political perspective? That was good thrills. Okay. How many folks are angry about what's going on? Okay, so quite a few folks. Okay, so back in probably, I was getting angrier and angrier throughout the 2000s, and back around 2006, what I kept finding was that things weren't changing. And so I started blogging online. That's the reason for the Akadjian name. So that is my name online because at the time I had a very corporate job and I did not want to be talking about politics at all online under my real name, because this way I'd be free to say more about what I believe. And as I started blogging and writing more and more about politics, this question kept coming up in my mind, so how does change happen? We have some ideas in our mind about how change happens, and we see, some of the biggest societal changes that, you're familiar with this type of stuff. The workers' movement, the civil rights movement, the sexual revolution, the gay rights movement that's been going on now, and then what I'm going to call the corporate movement from 1970s to the present, and also you see, what I'll refer to as the religious movement. All of these things, in some way or another, I think, perhaps with the exception of the sexual revolution, led to some type of legislation or change in government. From the workers' movement, we saw, things like the 40-hour work week. We saw worker protection bills. From the civil rights movement, we saw civil rights legislation, etc. And now from the corporate movement, we're seeing things like the right to work laws, etc. So what I found as I started doing research was that very few people wrote about this question, how does change happen? Now the people who do know about this question, and where I started finding the answers, was in corporate think tanks. And so there's a corporate think tank called the Mackinac Center that this describes how social change, or how policy change actually happens. And one of the reasons I bring this up is because a lot of times we think that politicians are the people who make these things happen. And they do. They're on the end of it. They're on the end of it. But what's really going on, and what the Mackinac Center says, is that they want to move all politicians. So they start up here. And that's where we get a lot of these corporate special interest groups working to create movements, so then social change happens. They get their people into office, that's the political change piece, and then the policy change happens. They refer to this as the Overton window, this after a guy named Joseph Overton. And the idea is that politicians there's a certain window of things, of solutions that are acceptable that they can pass. And anything outside of that window is going to be considered radical or unthinkable or acceptable. So they're always pushing to try to get the stuff they want. They're trying to push it into making it common sense. And this is where we see a lot of the commercials going on today, and a lot of the, what we hear on AM radio, what we hear on Fox News, what we hear in the news in general. A couple quick examples of this. So this is what the Overton window, according to the Mackinac Center, looks like. And they define their window: least freedom to most government intervention, to least government intervention and most freedom. And they would say that the current window is within here. You have charter schools, public school choice, state overseeing curriculum, etc. And what they're always trying to do is they're trying to move this up there. Because what they really want is they want to privatize the schools. And so this is the reason we hear so much about freedom and we hear so much about this idea of less government. It's because it's a way for them to move what is thought of as common sense by most people in our democracy. Another quick example. This is one you're probably familiar with as well. This is guns within the least government, most freedom, and most government intervention. And as you can see, the Overton window there, they've shifted it so far up there that, I mean, it's almost at the point where anyone can own, trade, or use any weapon whatsoever. So, if we're fighting within this frame, we're typically, this is the frame that they want to fight in. This idea of what they consider freedom and what they consider less government. And it's also why, in so many ways, talking about freedom is very important, because our ideas about freedom are very different than their ideas about freedom. I would say what they're talking about really is what I would call consumer choice. You know, it's most consumer choice. But it's not really freedom. You know, does anyone actually have any more freedom because they own more guns? But so anyway, so the Overton window, another way to think of it is, you can think of that as our culture. You know, the beliefs, values, and experiences of the majority, kind of what is accepted as common sense. Has anyone heard this term before, the Overton window? It's also what I think, I thought at the time when I first heard it, I thought, you know, this would be a great title for like a Robert Ludlum thriller, right? And so I go out online and I look, and wouldn't you know, freaking Glenn Beck wrote a book about this. Those guys understand these concepts very, very well. And it's something that we don't think a lot about. We're not thinking at this level of beliefs, values, and experiences. So, for my day job, I work in a corporation where I do a lot of work on organizational culture. And this is, if you want to change the culture of an organization, any type of organization, this is a great way to think about it in terms of what they call the culture pyramid. Okay, so your experience is going to inform your beliefs, which then inform your values, which then influence how you act and influence the results of your organization. Corporate think tanks understand this, and they have conversations here. They're always trying to change our beliefs and values. One of the things I noticed as I was writing in this world and you know, talking with lots of liberals and speaking with liberals is that often we talk at a higher level, and we're trying to have the conversations about what policy we should have, or what, you know, a very policy-focused conversation, as opposed to having conversations down here and working to change the culture towards what we believe. And then again, you know, kind of the loop here, the feedback loop is, you know, in a good organization, the idea is that you look at your results and it informs your experience. And if your results are good, you know, you incorporate that into your beliefs. If they're not, you change it. You change something, do something different. But so this is one of the reasons why corporate think tanks spend so much time and so much media on this type of thing. So a quick example of a liberal win on how they did this. So in 1989, where did I have this? In 1989, these guys, Marshall Kirk and Hunter Madsen, wrote a book called After the Ball. And the subtitle is How America Will Conquer Its Fear and Hatred of Gays in the 90s. Now, it didn't happen in the 90s. And I would say there's still a lot of fear and hatred out there. But it's come a hell of a long way. And their playbook was followed almost exactly. And so the first thing they did was they started saying, well, okay, so what are the beliefs that straight people have about gays? You know, and one of them was they don't even think about them. You know, or there were too many gays in America. Gays are easy to spot. Oh, because they act gay. Gays are kinky, loathsome sex addicts. They're unproductive. They're suicidally unhappy. Do any of these sound familiar? Okay. Okay. Well, what they advocated in this book was they advocated for what I'm talking about, changing the culture, changing the values. So the strategy, or a lot of their strategy, was emphasizing gay people as just like everybody else, right? So, and you know, they talked about gay people coming out of the closet and telling their story. You know, they wanted gay people to look good, moral. Very much when I say don't express yourself, communicate, what they were talking about here is talk at the values and beliefs level. They literally say in here that too much of what was going on with the gay movement in the 80s was that gay people were just out being flamboyant, being like, I'm gay, you know. And they said this was a really hard message for people to take, you know, because they didn't want to say, hey, don't be that way. But they wanted to say, you know, make sure that you communicate that you're just how similar you are to other people as well. Okay? They talked about appealing to independence, winning the independence, as well as, you know, like, if someone's really going to hate you, you know, don't waste your time on that person. Win the people who are winnable. And they talked about fighting for ordinary rights like marriage, portraying gays as victims of circumstance and oppression, and making the victimizers look bad. And then, this is crucial as well, because they said the way this has to happen, they said it has to be done through the media. And so a lot of what we've seen, or how they've done this, is they present very normal gay people in the media. Great example of this. Jim Obergefell, does anybody know Jim? Does that name sound familiar to people? Okay. He's the guy who just won the big case here. Well, I went to college with Jim, and Jim was the president of our choir. Jim is the most upstanding citizen you would ever meet. Like, everybody likes Jim. He was in a relationship with his partner for 20 years. You know, they were the most normal, you know, he had a corporate job at Convergys. Most normal folks ever. And it's one of the reasons that they chose Jim to press this case with. They went to Jim and they said, you know, you would make a great advocate for us. You know, would you help us do this? Would you help us do this? So they were always looking for, you know, folks to kind of come out and show how moral they are. They won the moral battle. So anyway, I just think this is pretty amazing. It's an absolutely amazing book to hear how this happened and how they changed the culture, and that was what led to changing these laws on marriage. Now, is there still work to be done? Of course, absolutely. But they understand how to do it. Okay, so quick question. So, what do people believe about atheists? You don't think? Yeah. Okay, don't think. What? I'm sorry?
Let's say 1989 list.
Oh, the 1989 list. Okay. They're going to hell. Okay.
So people would vote for a gay person for president before an atheist.
A gay person for president before an atheist.
I saw that in the paper.
Yeah. Oh man, that.
They're closed-minded. They're angry.
They're closed-minded. Okay.
Good luck.
Shut up!
Nice.
The devil.
No, I think that's all true. Okay, so a little short on time. I was going to do something here, but so I'm just curious: has anyone ever tried to convince somebody that there isn't a God?
A couple times.
Okay. How's the conversation gone. Just success or no?
Dave, how am I doing back there?
There's no success.
How am I doing?
Sometimes it's productive, sometimes it's not.
Okay. So, and again, I used to try to have this conversation, and I never got anywhere with it. So it was something that I finally just kind of ended up giving up doing, and have only recently come back to revisit it again, thinking about some of this, how has change happened, and so some of the conversations I have had that I've won and frequently won at are that atheists are moral, good people, or atheists are on your side. You know, I've talked to people. I said, hey, I believe in freedom of religion. You know, like I will fight with you for that. The importance of science. I went on that all the time. I went on separation of church and state. I went talking about poverty, human rights, democracy. I've had all those types of conversations. And what's interesting is, so Leela Alcorn issue, people familiar with it?
Yeah.
So I had a meeting with a minister at their church, okay? The church where the transgender teen committed suicide. And I went into this meeting thinking, oh my God, like who, you know, like how am I gonna talk to these people, right? So one of the things I did was kind of first, we just talked through and introduced ourselves, right? And got to know each other a little bit. Didn't touch any issues. And then I said, Tim, humor me. Let's go through this. There's an exercise I want to do with you. You know, and we started to trust each other a little bit. And the exercise was just, I was going to write down my values. He was going to write down his values. And then we were going to compare what was in the middle, what ones we both had the same. And then we could pick or choose from each other's what ones we agreed with. So this was our final picture that we both put together. So the ones we both had in common were friends, friendship, a higher calling, purpose, helping others, activism, family, love, relationships. Then the ones that we picked from each other's were things like generosity, kindness, honesty, faith, peace, equality, work, life, education, leadership, strength, all men created equal. When we got done, you know how many Post-its were left? Any guesses?
One.
Okay. The one has it. There was one Post-it left. You know what it said on it?
Faith.
Very close. It said a Christian worldview. It was the only thing we didn't have in common. Yeah. And so, at this point, like, Tim and I are becoming friends. We're joking around about stuff, you know, like making jokes about things. And we started to really trust each other. And, you know, and when it got to this point, and I said, Tim, you know, I can't tell you what to believe in terms of God or not God. I said, I can't, you know, that doesn't go anywhere. But I said, what's really interesting to me is, look at all the shit we have in common. And I did say, I'm sorry, I didn't curse, but I did say, look at everything we had in common. And it kind of, I mean, both of us were kind of, I was a little like, wow, I didn't think it would be this, you know, this close. I mean, we ended up becoming friends. And at that point, at that level, I kind of felt like I could finally start to have the conversations about, you know, LGBT issues. But it had to get to that point. So, one of the things I encourage is just, I encourage you to think about some of the areas where we can look, and where we can look moral. You know, I mean, how easy is it to show Christians that we're moral? You know? It's pretty easy. You just have to, and I literally have had this conversation with dozens of people now. It surprised me just how they would come out and they would say, oh, I just thought you were evil. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't even think you thought that. Okay, so anyway, so a few recommendations on how to move and how to have things we can do at this values and culture level. And one of the best is tell your story. Come out of the closet, like 8 people did. Tell their story. Find ways to fight on the same side with people rather than argue with them. Talk with people you know about their beliefs and what are your beliefs in atheism? You know, what do you think? Show how you're moral. Share, teach. Remember, it's emotional and not rational. You know, build a better culture. It's one of the things I love about Tri-State Freethinkers. I'm just amazed by this group. You guys are amazing. What you're doing here to build the culture. You're one of the liberal groups that really gets it. So I love that. And then take it to the media any opportunity. Okay. I'm David Akadjian. I have books back there if you want to know more details about how to do this. Otherwise, I will turn it over to you. Thank you.